Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And it's our history unit in today's lesson. And today we're going to talk about beards. A beard, of course, is when a man grows hair on his face. I guess sometimes women can in rare instances if they have some kind of genetic problem or something. But for the most part, beards belong to men. Again, that is facial hair, sometimes referred to as whiskers.
Yeah, but it has to be on your chin area. If it's just above your lip, it's a mustache.
Yep.
But if it grows on your cheeks and your chin, guys, that's a beard. And they're pretty popular these days, especially the goatee beard, which is a smaller beard. It doesn't cover your cheeks. It's just on your chin, and you've got the mustache on your lips.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting. We're going to talk about the history behind it, which I've never heard before, so this is fun to talk about.
It's going to be very fascinating. We're going to be talking about facial hair or beards, so let's get to it. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson right now.
It's no secret that most women have better fashion sense than men. However, men do have one special way to add flair to their appearance that's rarely available to women: the way in which they shape their facial hair. Shaving dates back to prehistoric times, as archaeologists have discovered stone shaving tools from the Neolithic period. Yet it was the ancient Egyptians with their obsessive grooming habits who transformed beard trimming into an art form. It was stylish for high-ranking Egyptian leaders to shave their faces, but keep a patch of hair on their chins. To spice things up, they would often dye their beards red or brown. Occasionally, they would even weave gold threads into their facial hair. Shaving became such a symbol of civilization in Egyptian culture that anyone who didn't shave was considered a barbarian. Thus, wealthy Egyptians normally kept a barber on their household staff. In ancient Rome, shaving caught on and became a more complicated issue, as it was associated with one's personality. Almost all Roman men were clean-shaven because a long beard was regarded as being filthy, messy, and sloppy. In the Middle Ages, beards reached their peak with the rise of the Vikings. Beards became a symbol of a man's strength and his ability to survive in the wilderness. In the 18th century, some doctors even advocated beards for health benefits, suggesting they could serve as protection against germs and air pollution. Over time, an interesting culture devoted to beards has arisen. Odd accessories like the mustache cup and spoon were invented. Both feature special trays for one's mustache to rest on, keeping it dry while liquids are being consumed. An artist named Incredibeard has created an Instagram profile featuring hundreds of photos of himself shaping his lengthy beard into unique patterns. It's a clear sign that beards are back in business.
Okay, let's talk about to beard or not to beard. This is a question men have to ask themselves sometimes. Should I grow a beard or should I not grow a beard? We do have that choice. Women might have similar choices with their bodies. I don't quite know what they are right now, but for men, sometimes we want to choose whether we want to grow a beard or not. Some men don't grow good beards. I know they don't grow beards because, well, it's all uneven and I don't look good in a beard. I can grow a beard myself and I've done it a couple of times in my life, but it's just too itchy. It's just too uncomfortable. I'd like to have a beard so I don't have to shave every day, you know, but on the other hand, it just itches too much, so I keep my face clean shaven. And it's no secret that most women have better fashion sense than men. Yeah, I guess you're wearing a scarf there and a kind of a vest there, and I'm just wearing a fleece shirt here. Yeah, I pretty have bad fashion sense, and women have better fashion sense than men. That's true, I'll confess that. But however, men do have one special way to add flair to their appearance that's rarely available to women. the way in which they shape their facial hair. Yeah, women don't really have facial hair, so men have this choice, and if you decide to have some facial hair in whatever form, it can add flair to your appearance. Here, flair is just some kind of special appearance, some kind of special addition to something. It gives it some kind of extra power, extra
appeal.
Yeah, it's more special that way is an actual word from French, but in any case here, yeah, you could add flair to your appearance if you have a beard. You could have a mustache. You could have a goatee, as you said, or you could just have a full Grizzly Adams beard.
Grizzly Adams was a guy on TV when we were young, and he had a really big, thick beard.
Yeah,
he looked like a bear.
Too.
I think
did
he?
The actor died recently. But in any case here, yes, indeed, that is what we are talking about.
Let's go now to the second paragraph. Shaving dates back to prehistoric times. If it's prehistoric, guys, it's time in our history before records were kept, so nobody was writing down history. So this is a long time ago. Now, we're talking about these archaeologists who've discovered something that had to do with beards. They were stone shaving tools from the Neolithic period, which is a long time ago. An archaeologist is a scientist who studies ancient civilizations, usually by digging into the ground and excavating or uncovering things that existed hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of years ago. The Neolithic period is one of the periods of time that scientists keep track of the age of the earth and people. The Neolithic period relates to the later part of the Stone Age, when people that were in existence back then were using stone weapons and tools to live with.
That's right, the Stone Age, or the later part of the Stone Age. Yet, it was the ancient Egyptians, you know, with the pharaohs and the pyramids and stuff. It was the ancient Egyptians with their obsessive grooming habits who transformed beard trimming into an art form. So before that, yes, maybe some cavemen figured out a way to get rid of the hair on their face, but it was the Egyptians, or the ancient Egyptians, who actually turned it into an art form because they had these obsessive grooming habits. If you're obsessive, that means you really think about something all the time.
Yeah.
It's very important to you. Grooming is when you make yourself look good. Combing, brushing your teeth, pulling the hairs out of your nose and stuff like that. And they transformed beard trimming into an art form. If you transform something, you change it from one thing to another. And trimming usually refers to when you kind of just get your hair or your facial hair just kind of cut a little shorter.
Yeah, sometimes I'll go to the beauty salon and want a haircut, but not a completely different style. I'll just say, oh, can I just have a trim? Which just means the stylist will probably cut off maybe half an inch, less than half an inch sometimes even.
You will keep the same style, but just make it shorter.
Tiny bit shorter, not even very, very much shorter, just so that maybe the split ends of your hair cut off. Well, they really got into grooming themselves, these ancient Egyptians. They were into that a lot. Now, it was stylish for high-ranking Egyptian leaders to shave their faces, but then just keep a patch or a little bit of hair on their chins. If you're high-ranking, you've got a pretty big job. You have more authority, perhaps, than other people. High-ranking officials, they probably worked perhaps for the military or the government. These were leaders back in Egypt. A patch is a word we use. It's a measure word to talk about a little piece of something. It could be a piece of cloth. It could be a piece of ground where someone wants to maybe raise some strawberries. So you need a patch. Strawberry patch, we'll often say, where we grow strawberries.
Or a pumpkin patch.
Pumpkin patch, too. Now, here it's just a little tiny area on a guy's chin where they don't shave. There's just a little bit of hair on their chins.
That's right. They just kept a little bit of hair there. I think I've seen some pictures. That does look pretty macho there. So, guys, you might want to consider that. It will drive the girls nuts if they think you're some kind of Egyptian pharaoh or something like that. And to spice things up, they would often dye their beards red or brown. If you spice something up, that means you give it extra flair. You give it extra appeal. So, yes, they would try to do one more thing to make their beards look look extra special, they might actually dye them a different color. Here, dye is D-Y-E. That means you use some kind of special chemical or special plants or something like that, and you change the color of something. It's very common here in Taiwan for girls to dye their hair different colors. The guys do it too. Every once in a while, I'm walking behind somebody and I think, hey, there's a Waiguoren. There's a foreigner walking in front of me, but no, it's actually a Chinese person with their hair dyed blonde.
Yeah, blonde. You see more and more of the blonde hair, or purple, or blue, or pink. I like the pink look. Well, sometimes you just need to add a little bit of fun to your life, and that's when you're going to spice things up. You can still dye your beards. I know my brother, who has just started to turn gray when he grows his beard out. His beard is a little gray. His hair's not. His hair's still brown, but he doesn't like his gray beard, so he starts using that for men only, which is a product where men can just comb some color onto their beard so it's not gray anymore. That's one thing you can do still. Now, occasionally just means sometimes, not all the time. Periodically, every now and then, these Egyptian guys would weave gold threads into their facial hair. Okay, these guys in particular must have had some money because gold is not cheap and it's never been cheap. It's always been a precious metal. So you had to have some money to have gold. They'd have these little gold threads that they'd actually put into their own beards and weave it in and out so it looked pretty shiny and sparkly, you could say. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It is, and here the word thread is like xian in Chinese, but that's the very thin one. We use that in sewing, and then if it's a little thicker, it's actually string. We use string to tie up our zongzi for...
True.
Dragon Boat Festival. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. And then if it's really thick and you use it to tie the boat to the pier, that is rope. So you got thread, string, and rope, but this is thread, little gold threads that they would weave into their facial hair, just kind of winding it around like girls when they have their hair braided. It's kind of like a weave, right?
Yeah, if you braid hair, you take pieces of hair and you put them over and under each other to make a beautiful braid or design in your hair. These guys wanted to have gold in their beards, and so they would occasionally weave those threads into their facial hair. We're going to continue talking about this civilization, which is very interesting, the Egyptians. But first, guys, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, my name is Tina. 我们来看一下今天的第一个空格的句子写着 However, men do have one special way to add flair to their appearance. That's blank one available to women. 我们都知道女生对时尚比较敏感，但是男人也拥有一个特别的方法，可以为自己的外貌增添风采。而这个方法呢，如果你看到后面的文章，你会发现是女人不太可能鲜少所拥有的。所以搭配文意呢，第一题我们可以选 L 选项的 rarely， 也就是少见的、鲜少的。正是因为今天要谈论的主题呢，就是胡子。而第二个空格的句子在这里提到 It was blank two for high-ranking Egyptian leaders to shave their faces, but keep a patch of hair on their chins. 在这里就谈到这些胡子的历史。那么在古埃及人来说呢，对于高阶级的埃及领导者而言，刮除脸上的胡子是怎么样的？不过会在下巴留一小撮胡子。那么你看到前面提到呢，他们有这种修理仪容的强迫性习惯，所以咯，要把胡子处理好是一种时髦高尚的举动。搭配文意，第二格我们可以选择 B 选项的 stylish， 就是时髦的意思。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Let us now continue with our lesson. Again, we're talking about beards, and we're also talking about shaving, which is something men need to do if you want to keep that facial hair off your face for whatever reason. Well, shaving became such a symbol of civilization in Egyptian culture that anyone who didn't shave was considered a barbarian, a savage, an animal, basically. So in Egyptian culture, of course, it was expected for you to shave your face. Otherwise, they considered you a monster, a barbarian, a beast, a savage, and you don't want to be considered that, do you?
We honestly don't use barbarian typically in our language today, except to describe someone who just isn't cultured. They used it quite often long ago, especially these really highly advanced civilizations like the Greeks and the Romans. They would often call people from other civilizations who didn't have as much education and they didn't groom themselves as nicely. They'd call them barbarians, like they acted like they, were just kind of monsters. Kind of dirty. They didn't take care of themselves. When they'd eat, they'd probably just take a piece of meat and rip it with their teeth. And, they'd use their hands a lot. So that's a barbarian. So you won't see it so much today, except to joke about it. Actually, we could call people barbarians.
It's kind of interesting because actually the word barba in Spanish means beard, which is probably from Latin. So the word barbarian probably referred to men who had beards.
Hairy men.
Hairy men, right. So they were considered barbarians.
And they didn't cut their hair. They didn't trim their hair.
Yeah,
they had big beards and just, they were hairy.
Looked like big gorillas.
Yes.
And you don't want to look like that.
Yeah.
So thus, or therefore, wealthy Egyptians normally kept a barber on their household staff. Hey, there's the word barber there. That's the person who cuts your hair. And again, barba is beard, so in Spanish and Latin. So a barber, of course, not only cuts your hair, but also gives you a shave.
He does, indeed. Now, these were wealthy Egyptians, so they had different servants who took care of them and just served them all the time. They had a barber on the staff. That's kind of fun.
How convenient.
Yeah, in ancient Rome, shaving caught on and became a more complicated issue because it was then associated with your personality, which is so interesting. If something catches on, it just means it becomes popular. So when someone does something new, at first, people probably look at them and go, yeah, that's weird. But then suddenly more and more people think, oh, I kind of like that. So a trend starts when something catches on. This is the past tense form, caught on.
Indeed, and so it became more complicated, it involved a lot more stuff, and it was associated with your personality, how you shaved yourself. It's kind of true nowadays, too, of course. Do you have a mustache? Do you have a goatee? Do you have a full beard? Maybe long sideburns? They're all part of your personality, and almost all Roman men were clean-shaven because a long beard was regarded as being filthy, messy, and sloppy, and probably a barbarian as well. So if you're clean-shaven, you shave all your facial hair off. Your mustache, your beard, everything is just off, and you shave every day, maybe even twice a day. And if you're filthy, that means you're really dirty. Messy means you're not very organized. And if you're sloppy, that's very similar. You don't do things in a careful way.
Yeah, my dad would shave twice a day because his beard would grow very quickly and he didn't want to hurt my mom's face. He always liked to kiss my mom, of course. So he would shave twice a day. He has never grown a beard or a mustache his whole life.
Wow.
He just doesn't like it. But my brothers do. They grow beards quite often. They think they're fun. Okay, into the next paragraph we go. In the Middle Ages, beards reached their peak with the Vikings. If you reach a peak, it means that's the height of your popularity. That's when probably beards were the most popular. The Middle Ages, I would say, a lot of the guys looked pretty barbaric back then. There's the adjective form of the noun barbarian. Barbaric. Now, the Vikings were some Scandinavian sailors, you could say. Actually, they were kind of like pirates because they would go and raid a lot of different countries in northwestern Europe. So this was a long time ago. This was back in Europe in the 8th through the 11th centuries. That was a long time ago. And of course, it was very macho to have a beard.
It can be nowadays, too. Of course, I imagine Canadian lumberjacks, and you can't have a Canadian lumberjack without a beard.
Keeps you warm.
It just doesn't work. But the Vikings, of course, had them as well, and beards became a symbol of a man's strength and his machismo and his ability to survive in the wilderness. If you were clean-shaven, you were a wimp. If you had a big beard, hey, you could go out there and fight bears and stuff like that. And in the 18th century, some doctors even advocated beards for health benefits, suggesting they could serve as protection against germs and air pollution. I've heard that before. I think I've also heard that actually sometimes more germs get in your beard if you have a beard. So you need to do some research on that. But a germ, of course, is something that's microscopic and it spreads diseases, kind of like bacteria, so you don't want that. Now let's move on now to the final paragraph here. It says, over time, an interesting culture devoted to beards has arisen. Arisen here is the past participle of the verb to arise, which means something emerges, it becomes apparent, it appears. And so beards have arisen, okay, or at least a new culture devoted to beards has arisen. Yes, indeed, there is this kind of modern movement, I guess, all about beards.
Oh, yeah, it's real popular now. It says in the next sentence, odd accessories like the mustache cup and spoon were invented. Tom was actually showing me a picture on the internet of what that cup looked like. He found one. They're kind of funny looking. Now, an accessory is something that is added to something else to make it more useful or versatile or even attractive. For example, ladies, we have outfits, clothing that we put together, you know, and we often have accessories like earrings and belts and scarves and watches, things like that. Those are accessories.
Indeed. So these are accessories for people who have a mustache, a cup there. I guess it prevents the hair from getting in your coffee if you're drinking a cup of coffee or sipping soup.
Guys have to be careful with mustaches and beards because they often get pieces of food in them.
That's true. And also, during the winter, it's interesting, the actual moisture from your breath actually collects on your mustache and then freezes there. So when you suddenly smile or laugh, it can really, really hurt. So you got to be careful there. That was the weirdest thing when I had a beard last time I was living in the cold north. But both of these accessories have those special trays to keep your mustache dry when you drink liquids. And we've also got an artist named Incredibeard. Hey, remember the movie The Incredibles?
Yeah,
that was like a boy in that called Incrediboy, Mr. Incredible. But here, this person is called Incredibeard, and he has created an Instagram profile featuring hundreds of photos of himself shaping his lengthy beard into unique patterns. So you can do that. Imagine if you have a very long beard, you could braid it, you could weave it into different patterns, you could even build a bird's nest in it.
Oh, dear.
You could do all sorts of things. Yeah, check it out. Google Incredibeard and see what sorts of things he has come up with. But I guess he also posts pictures of himself on Instagram. I guess you could access those on Instagram. I don't do Instagram, so I don't know how that works. But
yeah, just type that Incredibeard in the search area, and it'll come up. It's a public profile. It's not private, so you'll see his pictures. He wants followers, so you can follow and see some of the crazy shapes he puts his beard into. So it's a clear sign that beards are back in business. If you're back in business, it could literally mean maybe your store is open again for business, but if something's back in business, it's popular again. You'll see it around, so it's kind of fun.
Yep, so guys, grow your beard. You'll drive the ladies crazy. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
接着我们来看到第三个句子空格 Shaving became such a symbol of blank 3 in Egyptian culture that anyone who didn't shave was considered a barbarian. 这一句一定要看完才能够选择正确的答案。如果你不刮胡子，就会被视为是一个野蛮人，所以刮胡子已经成为埃及文化的一种怎么样的象征呢？当然，与野蛮相反的就是文明有文化。所以第三题标准答案选一，选项 civilization。接着第四个空格的句子提到 Thus, wealthy Egyptians blank 4 kept a barber on their household staff. 因此呢，有钱的埃及人就会在他们家里面呢，就会有一个理发师。那么既然很注重文明，所以通常大家只要有钱就会做这件事情。所以搭配文意第4题，我们可以选择 J 选项的 normally 正常的、通常的意思。后面提到了在古罗马时代又是怎么样呢？这里提到 shaving caught on and became a more complicated issue as it was associated with one's blank five. 在古罗马的时代呢，这个刮胡子呢也是非常的风行，而且成为一个呢更复杂的问题，因为你会联想到的是一个人的怎么样。后面的文章有提到，如果不刮胡子就会被认为是很脏乱、很凌乱，甚至邋遢。那么这个都是跟一个人的个性有关系。所以第5题标准答案我们就选 C personality。第6个空格再提到 In the Middle Ages, beards reached their blank six with the rise of the Vikings. 到了中世纪的时候呢，胡子随着维京人的崛起就到达了什么？那我们会说到达了它最鼎盛高峰的时期，搭配 reach 这个动词。第6题我们可以选择 F 选项的 peak， 也就有鼎盛或者是高峰的意思。Beards became a symbol of a man's blank seven and his ability to survive in the wilderness. 想要在这个荒野生存下来，当然就要有怎么样呢？跟能力。那么胡子就是它的象征，因为它象征的是一个人的气力跟他能够存活下来的能力。搭配文意第7题，我们就可以选择 A 选项的 strength， 也就有能力、力量的意思。接着 In the 18th century, some doctors even blend-aid beards for health benefits. 讲到医生会为了健康的缘故怎么样这个胡子呢？医生提倡你要留胡子，所以在这里呢，我们就可以选择 G 选项搭配动词 advocated， 就是有宣导、提倡的意思。最后一段的第一句Over time, an interesting culture, blank 9, to beards has arisen. 随着时间的演变呢，一项怎么样胡子的有趣文化已然兴起。后面就谈到这个比较特别的地方，所以这样的文化是专属于跟胡子有关的。第9题我们就可以选择 I 选项的 devoted， 就有专属于什么的意思。这里提到如果喝东西的时候你还可以使用的是胡子杯或者是胡子汤匙，重点就是希望能够 keeping it dry while liquids are being blank 10。 当呢这样子的液体被吃喝消耗的时候呢，用这个杯子就可以保持胡子干燥了。所以搭配文意第10题就选择 H 选项的 consumed， 有喝的意思。以上就是今天的课文讲解，谢谢收听。
That is it for today, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And even though we talked about beards today, I'm still not going to grow one. It's just a hassle to have one at this point in my life. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.